Okay, good morning. So up to Siman Reish Ayin Aleph Seif Gimel. So we're talking about Kiddush on Friday night. Says the Mechaba Reish Ayin Aleph Seif Gimel. Im ein yodem maseges likneis yain lekiddush ulahachin tzarchei suda lechvoyt halayla v'lechvoyt hayoyim v'lekiddush hayoyim. So sadly, the person has not got a lot of money. He's got limited budget and he's got to figure out. He needs to buy wine for Friday night. And he also hasn't got much money letzarchei tzuda for the meal, lekovat halayla, and also lekovat hayom v'kiddush hayom, and to buy wine and to buy food for the day meal. So what says the Mechaba, mutav sheyikne yain lekiddush halayla, mima sheyochin tzarchei tzuda, number oy mima sheyikne yain letzarchei hayom. Better to use the funds on wine for Friday night than for food on Friday night, or indeed for wine for the day meal. What's the question? We know generally the rule is that if you've got some nice food, you should keep it for Shabbos day and not for Friday night. Shabbos day is considered more chashuv. Kved yom is kodim l'kved laila. So that seems to fly in the face of what he's just said. So hainu dafka. So that's just if you've got nice food, you've got some good meat or whatever it may be. You should save that for Shabbos day rather than Friday night. But but if you've only got one glass of wine, then then actually Friday night takes precedent over Shabbos day. Good, says the Mishnah Berurah. Sif Katan Zayin Mutar Sheyikne. Now what is that? Why is it that Friday night trumps? And it has a priority over daytime, because the mitzvah of Kiddush at night is deraisa. And having nice food on Friday night is very important, but it's a mitzvah midivrei Kabbalah, which means it's referenced in Novi. Now, the mitzvah says so you could ask a kasha. You could say, as we've said previously, that you can be mekayim the mitzvah of zechiras yom haShabbos orally, just by declaring it and not have the wine. And then to have the wine on Friday night is only just a sort of a mitzvah midrabanan, which to enhance the whole zechiras yom haShabbos. V'chanal Mishnah Berurah Siv Katan Beis, like we said previously. Afilu hachi given the ikar kiddush min haTorah. But at the end of the day, since Kiddush on Friday night is min haTorah, it has a much more chashuv status. Gam yain shelo kodim lakol, and therefore the Mechaba paskins, if a person has got a limited budget, then he should use the money to buy wine for Friday night, because it's connected to the Kiddush, which is deraisa, even though he could have done the Kiddush in a drabanan way by making orally declaring Shabbos. He should do that. Yain shelo kodim lakol, and Friday night wine is the top of the list. All of the above, that you should use the limited budget for wine on Friday night, that's when you have bread both for Friday night and for Shabbos day. If Rahman Islam, a person hasn't even got bread for the day, hasn't got bread, if you've got a choice, what do I've got? I've only got a few pounds. Do I buy wine for Friday night, or do I buy bread? So he says, buy bread. Why? Because you're obligated to have a meal, and you can make Kiddush over the bread on Friday night. I'm just reading the Klausenberger Rebbe, the remarkable sefer. They've just brought out like an art scroll biography. So how he lived during the war years is just astonishing. In the many months that he was in the camps, and one time he would save up bread, sometimes, and starve himself, so he would have lechem mishnah for Shabbos. Wine is for sure he didn't have. So if he starved himself, so he'd have what lechem mishnah. He would have a few pieces, a few small dry pieces of bread, and that he could make kiddush on. And that's what I'm saying. If you can, there's a chiyuv to have pas b'layla and in the daytime, and therefore if you can only have before a bit of wine, a bit of bread, then you should definitely have the bread so that you can eat and you can make kiddush on it. And if a person also has got a very limited budget and he hasn't got, so he's got for kiddush at night time, but he hasn't got for kiddush at daytime or for a daytime meal, after mistaber to cover the yom odif mit kiddush hayom, even though covered hayom at daytime meal the chayra is more important than Kiddush Hayom, your daytime meal is more important than your daytime Kiddush, Mikal Makom, Efshe the Daile Bepas. You can get by just with bread, Va'amoise Yikne Le'yayin, and with whatever left over you have, you can buy some wine, Le Kiddush Hayom, Va'ayin Ve'halacha. Okay, then the Mishnah Berurah says, so again, if we're in Reish Ayin Aleph Sif Gimel, so we said if you have a person's got a very limited budget, the covered Laila comes first in this respect. He should buy some wine because that is deraisa. Says the Mishnah Berurah, yain letzorech hayom, hainu letzorech kiddush hayom. It's Friday night wins. Why? The Kiddush because Friday night Kiddush in its essence is from the Torah. For Kiddush Hayom Orach midrabanan, and the daytime Kiddush is drabanan, therefore the Friday night would trump. Even though he could make Kiddush on bread on Friday night, and therefore if he hasn't got anything to make Kiddush on in the daytime, he'll be left without Kiddush. Mikol Mokka, and therefore, why are you prioritizing Friday night over the daytime? Mikol Mokka, given the Mokum Sheish Yain Ein Mekach Narivta. At the end of the day, since where you do have wine, you therefore don't make Kiddush on bread. Delilah Adifa, therefore the Friday night trumps, and therefore you should use your wine for Friday night and not for Shabbos day. Okay, and then, so he asked the Kasha, the Mechaber said, well, hang on a second, surely covered Yom is better than covered Laila. And therefore, if you've got some nice meat or nice food, you should try and use it for Shabbos day and not for Friday night. So that seems to contradict this. So he explains that's only b'shar tzorchit suda. In other words, if you've got a nice piece of meat or schnitzel or whatever it is, and you want to choose, do I have that Friday night or do I have a Shabbos day? Then we say covered yom is kaidim le covered laila. Have it for Shabbos day. But if, however, you've only got a limited budget when it comes to wine, that should definitely be used for Friday night because the Kiddush on Friday night is deraisa. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Sif Cotton Tes, the nice food should be kept. You should prioritize the day over the night. You've only got a limited amount of nice foods. Better to leave it for the Shabbos day meal. Of a sefer Yamsha Shleima. He's critical of those people who have very large, lavish sudas on Friday night, and then daytime they have very, simple meals. He says that's not the way it should be. It should be the covered yom is yosem covered laila. It's kaidim the covered yom. Says Mishra Yud Sif Kosan Yud Hainu Bein Tzarchitud the Yom Bein Kiddush Yosem B'Yom or Kumesh Kosav B'Reish Hasif. Okay, so just to summarize, if a person has got a limited budget, then he should prioritize the wine for Friday night over the meal for Friday night, and over the wine for Shabbos day and the meal for Shabbos day. However, the rule of covered yom, kaidim le covered laila, that means if you've got some nice foods and special delicacies, you should prioritize the daytime over the nighttime. And you can sometimes have that. For example, there's a kigel for Friday night, a kigel for Shabbos day. One's a nicer kigel. Try and leave the nicer things for Shabbos day. That's the rule of covered yom, kaidim le covered laila. Okay, dalet. Also, litaim klum kaidim kiddush, sheikadish. You're not allowed to eat anything or drink anything before you made kiddush. Afilim mayim, even water. Afilim hischem b'yid yom. Even if you were drinking, so on erev Shabbos, tzarich lahafsik. You've got to stop. Shepiris mapum mekadesh, because when Shabbos comes in, you sort of cover over the table and you make kiddush as a chiyuv kiddush. V'im hoysheisim yayin techila. If, however, you are eating on Friday afternoon, you're having a meal, and you were drinking wine, and you had made a ber pregofen in that meal, then eina oime ele kiddush bevad b'lo birchas hayayin, because there's no need to make a new birchas hayayin because it's the same setting. That sometimes happens. This discussion always comes up on a Friday Purim. I think it could be this year that Purim's on a Friday, possibly. It is. So when Purim's on a Friday, there's a whole discussion whether you're Peres Mappa Mekadesh, but that means you're in the middle of a Suda, you've made a Ber Gofen, and then comes Friday night, you've got to make Kiddush. So what he says here, Eino Emele Kiddush Belvad below Birchas Hayayin. You just make Kiddush without the Birchas Hayayin, because you've already made the Birchas Hayayin. V'ach kach mevarech Birchas HaMoitzi, and then you make HaMoitzi. V'im ein lo yayin o Mekadesh lapas, and if a person does not have wine, and is making Kiddush on bread, Eino mevarech HaMoitzi, because he's in the middle of a meal. He just makes the bracha of Kiddush. V'yesh oimrim she'af k'shemekadesh al hayayin, ein mevarech HaMoitzi. that even when he's making Kiddush on wine, he doesn't make the bracha al hametzi because he's in the middle of a meal. Okay, says the Mishnah Berurah. Also, you're not allowed to eat before Kiddush. V'zeh Orach is a drabonon. Not eating before Kiddush is a drabonon. V'atam kim the chiyuv shel Kiddush chal olav miyad b'chnisas Shabbos, because the chiyuv Kiddush began as soon as Shabbos came in. V'afilu lo kibel of Shabbos behedra. Even if you didn't, bring on Shabbos, but lemaisa it's now Shabbos has come in. To kivin shenas sofik chashecha memela chol olav Shabbos, because it comes automatically. V'im kibel of Shabbos, and if a person was makabel Shabbos, let's say in the summer or something like that, afilu adayin yom gadol, even though it's still daylight outside, dinahachi. If you've been makabel Shabbos, then you cannot eat before Kiddush. If a person we discussed before, he wants to be makabel Shabbos early, and then he wants to have his suda, and he wants to daven Marav at night, he's entitled to do that. So long as you're not sort of eating your meal very close to Marav, like we discussed before. You can't eat kodim shir kaddish. Says Mishnah Berurah Sif Cotton Yud Beis. Va'afilu ein lo ela kos echad. Even if he's only got one glass of wine, you kaddish alav yivarech birchas hamazon b'lo kos. Then you make kiddush on it, and you'll have to make kiddush without a kos. V'hainu afilu leman desvirei birchas hamazon tuna kos. Even if you hold that benching requires a kos, le'el b'simin kuf be'beisiv aleph, v'lo yechel kodim shir kaddish, and don't eat before you've made kiddush. That kos of kiddush should be used for kiddush. Afilu mayim, you can't even drink a glass of water. V'shari lichot piv b'mayim. You are allowed, however, to wash out your mouth. Given de'ena mechaven hanas te'ima, you're not drinking, you're just sort of rinsing out your mouth. What about taking medication before kiddush? So he says, if you look at footnote 25, he says, "U'metam zeh kosav v'shayla zutshuvas minchas Yitzchak shemishi kabel Shabbos koden ben hashmashos." If a person is makabel Shabbos early, he needs to take some sort of tablet. You're not getting much hana from this, so take a bit of water with a medicine or with a tablet. You don't make a bracha, yeah, but it's not in the bracha, it's in the te'ima, and therefore this is not a te'ima shahana, and therefore it's allowed. So as soon as Shabbos has come in, whether you've brought Shabbos in early, or whether it's just, it's the Zman of Shabbos has come in. He says in 26, he says, Vazman shetzorech lahafsik is kodim ben hashmoshes. So let's say Shkia is, at 6 p.m. So just a moment or two before that, you've got to stop drinking before Shkia as well. Even though you may have begun drinking or eating beforehand, shani hachad the Kiddush shaykh lesuda. The Kiddush is a din in the Suda. V'lechatchila iskin sheikadish kodim Suda b'mokum Suda. The Chazal masakin that you make Kiddush before the Suda in the place of the Suda. Now, if you were in the middle of a meal, then you can be peiris mapa. What does that mean? Lechasoy sapas. You cover over the bread adacha Kiddush. V'achach yisiren, and then you remove the cover. Ke'echid desisra, that sort of the meal appears. The also hasuda hashtalikar de Shabbata. Now you see that this meal is coming for the honor of Shabbos. Va'afim lo yoshav adayin lechol. Even if you haven't sat down to eat, kam kein dinahachi desorach prisas mapo be'es hakiddush. You still need to cover up the challah at the time of the kiddush. Uchad lekam b'siv tes. Ela de komash melon b'zeh da'af hu shebemsa chilosa dai b'prisas mapo. The kiddush is that even though you might be in the middle of a meal, all you need to do is just cover over the challah, and then you make kiddush. Below birchas hayayin, and if you've already made a birchas hayayin, you've had some wine, then you do not need to repeat the bracha on wine. Says the Mishnah Berurah Tezayin, to kiven the beirach kvar b'soich hasuda b'tchilas hashtir. Since you've already made the bracha earlier on in your meal, shuv ein tzorach levarach hatza berber hagofin koydem hakiddush. You don't need to make again the berber hagofin before kiddush. V'uadin she'ein tzorach levarach al hayayin shemetoich hasuda. So too, you don't need to make a bracha of wine during the meal. To ein shum hesach hadas ben shtiyas hakodesh shel kiddush shtiyas hayayin shemetoich hasuda. Because if a person makes kiddush on Friday night and you've got the wine there, you don't need to make a new bracha. There's no hesach hadas when you go out to wash. It's all part of the same meal. You've got to be careful, by the way, shalashudas sometimes, because you haven't made kiddush at shalashudas, and then if you want a glass of wine during the meal shalashudas, you'll remember to make a berber gofen, because you haven't been yet. Okay. Yud Zayin. V'achach mevarich birchas hamoitzi. Hainu k'shebol ligma ach kach sudasoi mevarich birchas hamoitzi. Mechodesh you make a new hamoitzi. Te'en yetz b'hamoitzi shebirch b'tchilas hasuda. Lefisha kiddush shebentayim, because the kiddush that happened between them. So once Shabbos comes in, you can't really carry on eating until you've made Kiddush. And therefore, that Kiddush is considered a hefsek, zehavi hefsek. And therefore, once you then go make Kiddush, that was a hefsek. So now you've got to wash again to have this, to begin a new Shabbos meal, and you need the Birchas Hamazon, etc. In contrast, if you didn't have any wine and you're making Kiddush on bread, and therefore the Zman of Hamoitzi, i.e. you make Hamoitzi, then you make Kiddush. And therefore, and therefore the Kiddush is not a hefsek, because the Birchas Hamoitzi comes first. And in that situation, you don't need to make a new Hamoitzi. Interesting. It's really like the Kiddush le'av hefsek, because the Kiddush is not considered the hefsek. For given the Sophic brachas la'akav yesh litfos kayesh oimrim. Okay, so therefore also to eat before Kiddush. That's the main point. Okay.